David Vocke graduated from Miami University of Ohio in 1977 with a bachelor's degree in Education Social Studies. Dr. Vocke taught in public education and at several institutions of higher education before accepting a position at Towson University in 1989 as a member of the Department of Secondary Education. These are his reflections.
Dr. Vocke, thank you so much for your willingness to be part of the Teacher Education Oral History Project. Your story will add immeasurably to our understanding of teacher education across time, especially at Towson University. I think the place we should begin is in the beginning. So could you share with us a little bit about your early social context, where you grew up, what kinds of career thoughts you were having as you went through high school?
Okay. All right. I grew up in Fairfield, Ohio, which is a suburb of Cincinnati. I went to high school at a school, Baden High School, which is one of the Catholic high schools. It's actually in Hamilton, Ohio. I graduated in 1973. I enjoyed school. I had fun in school. I liked my teachers. I thought then that I would be a teacher.
Oh.
But when I graduated in '73, and I had a brother that went through at that point, 2 sisters that had gone through, but none of my siblings went to college. But it was still kind of accepted that I don't know, the group that I socialized with in high school, that we'd all go to school, and we did. I went first to Marian College, a small Catholic college in Indianapolis. I had a teacher who was influential that knew the admissions director there and arranged a trip to go, and there was myself and 2 other folks that I went to high school with that went there. So I had some influential teachers. I had influential social studies teachers in high school that I enjoyed. I was in student government and student council. I was a student council nerd in high school. That was a little bit different because our high school in Ohio, football's a big deal.
Oh, sure.
But lots of my friends, we all socialized together. So we had good times. I still have good friends back in Fairfield and Hamilton. So I went to Marian.
Yes.
I majored in accounting. I had a brother-in-law that was a teacher. Everyone at that time said don't go into teaching because they saw the end of the baby boom generation and the decline in enrollments and the reduction in force that was coming in the teaching profession. So I took a bookkeeping class, really 2 years of bookkeeping. I guess it was accounting, but it was really just bookkeeping in high school, and I kind of enjoyed that. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I decided that I really didn't want to be an accountant. We got into oil depletion allowance and other topics that just didn't really do much for me. So I switched my major to social studies. And then after 2 years at Marian, which I enjoyed. Again, the school had about 900 students. It was it was a change. It was enjoyable. There were a lot of other students from Cincinnati, from LaSalle, from Elder. Those were all big Catholic high schools in Cincinnati. So I made a lot of good friends there. Yes. But my dad passed away between my freshman and sophomore year. I still had a younger brother at home. And in order to help my mom, I went and transferred to Miami University in Ohio, which is 30 miles from my hometown. So it was a little closer. I could go back home on the weekends if needed and help. Wasn't paying out-of-state tuition at a private school, so that was beneficial. So I went to Miami, and then that's where I decided that I was going to be a social studies teacher. It is something that I'd always wanted to do, and just decided that I would do what I'd have to do to find a job. Right. And I really found probably my mentor there. It was a professor by the name of Mike Fuller, who was the social studies main instructor there and my advisor. He really helped me through because transferring, being an accounting major, I had to take summer classes, but I got out. I graduated in 4 years in a summer.
That's very impressive.
Yeah, it was But I was putting my way through school. I did get some, help with Social Security survivor benefits. But I worked in a bar. I tended bar, for 2 years while I went to school. And I really enjoyed those years at Miami. Miami's got a great reputation, and they've got a great education program.
Could you tell us a little bit, do you remember, I should ask that, remember anything about your student teaching experience?
Yeah, I student taught at Withrow Junior High School in Oxford. A lot of student teachers. Miami's kind of isolated. It's in a very rural part of southeastern Ohio. Some students go to Hamilton, which is there, but that's about a 20-mile drive, or into Cincinnati, which is about 35 miles, or even close to Dayton, or into small rural districts in Ohio. I think because I knew Mike Fuller so well, he got me the one in Oxford, which was about 3 blocks from school. And I did 8th grade American history with Dale Rolfus, was my then we call cooperating teachers. I guess today he would be my mentor. And I did 16 weeks of American history and really enjoyed it. Dale was a real sociable guy, a real good social studies teacher, a great mentor to have. I helped coach the track team, with them. His wife, or another teacher there was Tammy Walker. Her husband was one of the top football players at Miami. He went on to coach Northwestern University, but she was the track coach, so we helped coach together.
And this was while you were student teaching? This
was during student teaching.
So you were considerably engaged
right.
in the school.
Well, yeah, I felt like, you had to be immersed, and it was really an enjoyable time. It was, somewhat stressful, but I enjoyed what I was doing and liked the work. And I didn't have to travel as much as some of my colleagues did, so that was beneficial.
So you're feeling at the end, about time you're graduating, completing this, you're feeling really good about this choice of teaching.
Sort of, because there were no jobs, and I didn't graduate until July. So I went through a summer graduation. So, in the sense of finishing the program and having the degree and getting the certification, that all happened late in July and early August, with the school year coming, around Labor Day. So I scrambled. I can remember I had 5 job interviews. One was in Waverly, Ohio, which is in the far eastern, southeastern edge of Ohio in Appalachian coal country. I went for the interview. At the interview was the school superintendent, the school principal, and the football coach. And I can still remember the first question they asked me was, what's an Oklahoma defense? Because they wanted a social studies teacher that could coach football. That didn't go so well, but I'm kind of glad it didn't. I may have taken a completely different path. And then
wasn't a tight fit.
No, then I can remember going to, and that was about 3 hours away. And then I went to an interview in Kettering, Ohio, which is around Dayton. They wanted a soccer coach, so that didn't go so well. But about 4 days before school started, I interviewed at a small suburban school that abuts the city of Cincinnati. In Ohio, there's over 400 districts, so they're much smaller. So it's a small community called North College Hill. And they had 2 elementary schools, I believe, a junior high back then, and then a high school. And basically, they didn't even have any buses because all the kids walked to school.
Wow.
The district was that small. And I got a job there teaching 9th grade world cultures and 11th grade world history to 2 classes, ancient world history. And that was 4 days before school started. And then I was the cross-country coach because they never had a cross-country team. I tried to recruit kids. I didn't know anybody. I can't remember. I don't know. You needed 8 kids for a team, I think, and I had 7. So whenever we went to a meet and we were in the paper, it was always DNF next to our name. Did not field a team. Is what it's. But I had nice kids there, that came out for that, and that was enjoyable because I got to know people in the district and got to know some of the parents and some of the other coaches. So it was interesting because the world cultures texts that they use, anybody in social studies, they were Larry Cuban texts. So you had, we had 4 different cultures that we covered. We had, I think it was Japan and Mexico and Kenya. Japan, Mexico, Kenya, oh, and then France. So those were our 4. But I only had enough textbooks for each, a set of Japan, so I had 30 of those, so I had to teach that. And then I had, so I could only do 2 cultures at a time, so that was 2 preps. And then I had the world history prep that I had to do for the juniors.
And nothing about the United States
No,
in this at all?
No, which was kind of my concentration and what I did my student teaching in. So, but it was enjoyable. I mean, that was tough.
Sure.
Especially in the beginning. And I lived at home those first 4 months. I think I moved in November with some of my buddies to an apartment in Cincinnati.
And how long did you stay there?
So I was there for a year.
Uh-huh.
And there was another teacher. She was hired to teach. She was a business teacher. She was 22 and I was 22. Yeah, I think it's 22. And everybody else was in their 30s. They hadn't hired a teacher in 7 years.
Wow.
And then we both got RIF'd, reduction in force.
Okay.
But fortunately, in Ohio, the school districts are so small that each district doesn't have its own vocational system, or its own vocational school.
Okay.
So they have what they call joint vocational school districts. So a lot of suburban districts feed into a joint high school. It's called the Great Oaks system, and it was the joint vocational school district. So the folks that I worked with, and really the principal that I worked with, I can see him, but I can't remember his name. The vice principal was Doug King. I guess Doug had a role in it too. They contacted the joint vocational, Diamond Oaks Vocational School was the school that they actually got me a job at. So then I went and taught seniors American history and government. Because the kids from North College Hill, they would be at North College Hill their freshman and sophomore years, and then feed into the vocational school for their junior and senior years.
Now that's an interesting and different
Yeah.
group of students for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they were interesting, especially the group right after lunch. Frank McCammon and Ray Davis, and I don't think they'll see this, but I can still remember that group. So I went there, and then I taught there for 3 years. And yeah, it was interesting because the kids were not motivated for social studies or not motivated for English, and they were motivated for auto mechanics, or they had an equestrian program or a carpentry program or HVAC, but they were nice kids, and I still say that they appreciated teachers who tried to make a difference. This will date me, so this would have been 78 to 81. And at that time, Diamond Oaks had a smoking lounge. So imagine that.
For students.
I mean, right, for students. The teachers' lounge was bad enough for,
oh, I'm sure.
For all the teachers that smoked. But so that was my duty, was to be on the smoking lounge at lunch to make sure that the kids weren't smoking things other than cigarettes, and transactions weren't taking place and those kinds of things. But I think that was probably one of the best things for me, is because I got to know a lot of the students that way. They would come up and talk to you, and it's you try to emphasize to the students is that they appreciate when students take an interest in you.
Yeah.
So that was Diamond Oaks. It was a good place. I mean, you had to teach in order to keep kids interested, so you had to make and it was fun because a lot of it was American government. So we had the Iran hostage crisis at the time. We had the election with Carter and Reagan. So there were lots of ways that you could relate social studies to students, and we had the gas prices going up at that time. So those kids are interested in those kinds of things.
Certainly.
So that was lots of fun.
At some point, you're going to continue your education, which has always been a push for teachers, at least to pursue a master's degree.
Right.
So when did that sort of take shape?
I started while I was at Diamond Oaks. I enrolled, I'd take a summer class here and summer class there and go back to Miami. I wanted to continue working with Mike Fuller. During my third year at the Oaks, I just decided that I'm going to go back and I applied for an assistantship at Miami. I wanted to go back and just do it all in one straight shot and get it finished. And then really I thought I'd apply at another school district once in Cincinnati once I had, there are probably 80 school districts in the Cincinnati area, to move on, to another district. So that would have been 81, I believe. I got an assistantship at Miami. They still had a lab school. The McGuffey Lab School was there, so that was grades kindergarten through 8th grade. So I then taught a year as my assistantship. I was a English language arts teacher for grades 6, 7, and 8.
Interesting.
Yeah.
At a McGuffey school.
Yeah, at the
Isn't
McGuffey.
that
Yeah,
amazing?
the education building is McGuffey Hall. William Holmes McGuffey did teach at Miami. Was a professor there. So. So that only lasted a few more years, and then they closed it, much like we lost Lyda Lee Tall. They lost McGuffey about 5 years after I left. So I did my master's degree in a year there. Got out again in the summer. Mike Fuller was a graduate of the University of Iowa in the early 60s. While I was there, I was applying at grad schools for my doctorate. I didn't really know what that was, but Mike thought that I had some potential there, so I applied. I know I applied at Indiana and I applied at Iowa. I got into both places, but because of Mike's influence, I went to the University of Iowa. The professor there that he had worked with was John Hafner, who in the 50s was a significant person within the National Council for the Social Studies, and really a nice guy. So I went to work with John, but he'd actually retired. That was the year that he retired. But I still, I house sat for him. I cut his grass for him because we needed the money. But there were other influential folks there. Bob Fitch was another big name in social studies in the 70s, and then Jerry Shive was my dissertation advisor there, and was relatively new, but had a significant influence. So I really went on to do the PhD more. I've got to be honest. When I went through undergrad school, I didn't know what it took. I didn't know, the ins and outs. But I kind of stumbled my way through. I still believe that if you persevere, you can get through, and if you work hard. So Robin and I got married that summer of '82 and August of '82, and then we packed things. Actually, a friend of mine that I taught with at Diamond Oaks, we packed up his pickup truck and a U-Haul trailer and took everything to Iowa City that we had.
My heavens. Off you went.
And we got married in the beginning of August, and then by mid-August we were in Iowa City and taking classes. Robin worked at they've got a great hospital system there. They're the main hospital for the state of Iowa. So she worked at the University of Iowa hospitals, and I had my assistantship there, and worked with Jerry Shive in the research office, and did my 3 years that came out then in '85 with my doctorate.
Wow.
But Iowa was fun. We had a good time. We had a close-knit group of friends. A lot of our friends were nurses that Robin worked with, and their husbands were either going through, one was going through an engineering school, and then the other ones were going through medical programs. And that's where I learned that doctors are pretty much like everybody else. And may not be the brightest guys there either. So we had enjoyable times, there, and the work in the doctoral program was good. I did a lot of history and political science and anthropology courses. It was mainly, I had some influential folks in the education field, but mainly in things like international, education, those kinds of things. Jerry, helped me in terms of, I taught, in addition to working in the research office, that's where I first taught foundations, and Jerry kind of, let me watch him a few times first and then helped me with the curriculum there. So that's how I got started teaching foundations, and then I supervised student teachers there all through these little burgs in Iowa, from Bettendorf, which is on the Mississippi River, to Cedar Rapids, which is the big city, in Iowa. I did my doctoral dissertation on global studies, which there was a nonprofit in Bettendorf, Iowa, in Muscatine, Iowa. God, now who's the name of the group? They're one of those that advertises on NPR. They support those things, but I did a study on global studies that was interesting, that served me well initially. Yeah, I got a lot from being in Iowa. I worked with I had a historian on my dissertation committee by the name of Ellis Hawley, who was one of the top scholars in terms of the Hoover presidency. Not that a lot of people would find that too interesting, but Hoover was from right around there, and on the 20s, just his classes were just amazing, and he was a great person to have on my committee. Another advisor or member of my committee was Scott McNabb, who was a professor in the College of Education that did a lot with international studies, did a lot with Thailand and Vietnam and China. We still had an international course on Chinese education, which was interesting. So, I did really well by going to Iowa. I'm glad that worked out. So
there you are, doctorate in hand.
So there I am in '85.
3
Yeah.
years and you're done, and you're looking for employment.
Right. So my first job, because again it was another summer graduation, and then you're scrambling. So I applied at many places. I can remember I went to the AACTE conference. Jerry said that's where I needed to go to find a job.
Yep.
It was in Denver. They paid my airfare, I think maybe my hotel, but I remember I took the public transportation from the airport because that was when it was closer to Denver than it is now, into the hotel, and then I interviewed, those days. I interviewed, I can remember with Eastern Michigan and University of Missouri, but I was sending resumes everywhere.
Yes.
And had a number of interviews, and some that were good and some that were not so good. But it gave me some experience. But anyway, I ended up, the job that I took was at a college in northwest Iowa, city of Storm Lake, Iowa, which is a small place, about 10,000 people, although that was the major metropolitan area for northwest Iowa, at Buena Vista College.
How big a school?
About 900 students again. It's interesting because there is actually a lake in Storm Lake. It's not very deep, but the campus was right on the shores of the lake, and it had a great endowment. There was a family called the Sebens, and they made their money in oil in Canada. So they had just finished a conference center, union, classroom buildings for the business school that was actually mostly underground because the winters were so cold that it was one of those first buildings to kind of take advantage of the being underground. And it was really because it was so new, it was really a nice place to be. Now, of course, the education building was an old dump, but for the campus, it was nice. And I made some good friends there. There were some folks who were really dedicated and young, folks in our position. Scott was born there in July after we'd been there for a year. We rented a house 3 blocks from campus, so I could walk to campus. Robin was a school nurse. She was an RN, but couldn't find, the hospital, I think, had about 25 beds. So they didn't need an RN, but they needed a school nurse. So she was the school nurse for the elementary school and the middle school and the high school. She had her future nurses club that she worked with. I can remember walking to classes in January and with wind chill and the blowing wind. It was like 50 below zero. The actual temperature was 21 below zero.
So this might suggest...
So the winds did come whipping across the plains.
Yeah. So it's cold, and maybe we're thinking at some point it certainly would be nicer to be in a warmer climate.
So we moved. We were there for a year. And again, I supervised student teachers. You did everything. I taught general methods. I taught social studies methods. I supervised student teachers.
Well, sure.
We were out in the hinterlands. I'd be supervising student teachers in school districts that had 120 kids, K through 12, in the schools. So I really got to know western and northwestern Iowa. We were 2 hours from Omaha, and then an hour and a half from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, which is, those were the two places that you would fly out to if you had a conference or something to go
Right.
to. But again, the kids were very nice. The people were dedicated to, to teacher education, and I thought we did a nice job in terms of preparing kids for the classroom. But actually, I'd applied at the University of Texas at Arlington at the same time when I was initially looking for a job out of grad school, and they had turned me down. And then actually, after I'd signed the contract with Buena Vista, they had called back and said, well, you know what, we had another resignation, and now we'd like for you to come down.
No.
And I said, well, I've signed the contract.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
Right.
So the position came up again, so I applied again, went down and interviewed at the University of Texas at Arlington. So now we're moving from 10,000 people in Storm Lake to Arlington, which is the main suburb between Dallas and Fort Worth, a school of 30,000, mainly an engineering school, but they had the Center for Professional Teacher Education. Interviewed and got the job there. So left after a year in Storm Lake. We loaded up the U-Haul again. Scott was 3 weeks old, and made the trek from Storm Lake to Dallas Fort Worth, and then spent 3 years there, and enjoyed it. But Texas was not exceptionally hospitable towards teacher education.
Well, it sounds like the school particularly was more interested in engineering
Yeah.
and those kinds of
Yeah.
fields
Yeah.
rather than.
And this is a time when, so it would have been 86 to 89. The oil industry was going bust at this time. We had a program that took a lot of engineers who had been working in the oil industry and petrochemical industry, and tried to prepare them for teaching in math and science.
Really?
They had tons of folks, but they weren't generally all that successful because a lot of them had been out in West Texas working drilling holes and figuring out where to drill holes, and really didn't know kids too much. And then the state was somewhat hostile towards a lot of credits in terms of teacher education programs. So theirs was more of let's streamline and make it an easy pathway to get people into teacher certification rather than provide them with more training. So, I mean, it was enjoyable. The living there was enjoyable. Again, we were in a neighborhood with a lot of other young people that were in the same boat. Scott was, by the time we left, was 3. Katie was just born again. Again, she was 3 weeks when we left. I worked with some really good people at UTA, and especially a guy by the name of Skip Chilcote, who was a good writer in terms of social studies and had a lot of innovative ideas as far as social studies instruction was concerned. So we collaborated on some things. Skip left a year after I did and went to BYU, and continued his career there. But we did a lot of presentations together, wrote some things together, and he made it enjoyable in terms of having a colleague that was in an office next to you that you could share things with.
Very important.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Again, students did a lot of teaching foundations there and general methods courses. We didn't have room for a specific methods course, so it wasn't social studies methods.
And that was the nature of the program.
Right,
It was sort
right.
of this condensed.
Yep. You had to have a
experience.
methods course. I don't
see.
even think we did the reading courses there. You had to have the foundations. I mean, it was had an assessment course, and we kind of had people that specialized in those kinds of things. Supervised student teachers again. So school systems were different, in Texas.
I would think so.
Than here, and especially in Arlington and the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Big. A lot larger school systems, but again had kids that really worked hard and did a nice job. What else? Oh, I was pretty active in the PDK chapter there. That was a good group to get to know people in the school systems. That was the time when, I don't know if you remember the name, Jack Freimeyer at PDK was doing the study on students at risk and had the chapters collecting data. So I worked with the school systems in terms of that, and that was kind of rewarding in terms of getting to know school systems and
Sure.
seeing how they collected that kind of data and
And
stuff.
you would have a much larger pool of
Yeah,
people,
definitely,
of students.
definitely.
So you could really find some interesting
Mm-hmm.
things with those data.
So we kind of saw the handwriting on the wall in terms of Texas's attitude towards education. Sorry for those folks that are there, but I think they would agree even today from what I hear. So, we were looking, we really wanted to get back to the Midwest. We would have liked to have gotten back to Ohio or Indiana, Michigan, somewhere around there. So I applied again, and that would have been kind of, let's say around Christmas time in 89 or 88, 89, right around there. So I had interviews here at Towson. I had an interview at Old Dominion. I had one at Wittenberg in Ohio, and then I had an interview at Xavier in Cincinnati, which would have been going back home. So I think in the scheme of things, I can still remember it was April the 11th is when I interviewed here.
Really?
Yeah, and it was, there was Jim Lawler and Gloria and Selma Lyons and Margaret Kiley and Sam Broadbelt and Mike Jessup. I think Lois was the new faculty member, Lois Stover.
And who was chair?
Who worked well. Jim was chair.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim. So this would have been after, I don't know, they have those stories of all those people that preceded Jim. But no, Jim was my contact and was the
Okay.
chair because he was calling all the time. Because it was a nice relationship, and I enjoyed that Jim was, was really hands-on and on top of things. But the day that I remember it was the 11th because I got an award at UTA. I got a Teacher of the Year award.
Wow.
And on that day was when they gave the award before the faculty senate. And I was here, and Robin had to go and accept the award.
Oh, no.
And she was pregnant with Katie at the time. And she wasn't real happy with the fact that she had to go and receive the award in my place. And because I called, there used to be a payphone on the lecture hall on that ramp that used to come down.
Yes.
And I went and called after, we didn't have the cell phones then, and called and talked to her after the interview. And I said, well, I think things have gone well. I might get an offer here. Because actually I gotten offers at all the other places and ended up picking Towson. It just seemed to be a right fit, which didn't sit well with a lot of siblings and other family members back home because Cincinnati was right, the Xavier job was right in my backyard. But that just wasn't a good fit for me.
Yes.
So this was. So once again, we packed up the U-Haul. We had a 3-week-old baby and made the trek from the Dallas-Fort Worth area to Baltimore. And so that was in August of '89. We moved here. And I've been here since. We were going to head back to the Midwest probably after 5 or 6 years was the original plan.
But you didn't have another 3-week-old baby.
But we didn't have
so
another
you didn't
3-week-old
move.
baby. We stopped that. But at one point when I was looking, Robin was enrolled in a graduate program at UMB in nursing. It was nursing
Wonderful.
informatics. There were not many other, I think there was only one other program in the country.
Wow.
So we were getting tuition remission. She wanted to finish that program.
Absolutely.
And then that took a couple years, and then by the time we looked at it, now Scott was in middle school and Katie was entrenched in elementary school, and it was like, well, maybe it wouldn't be such a good idea to move. Anyway, and plus, things were going well for both of us, and things were going well here. So, so it's been, I guess I'll finish out 24 years come this August, and we'll be into the 25th.
So what kinds of things have you done here at Towson?
What kind of things have I done?
24 years. I bet
Yeah.
you've done a variety
lots
of
of
different
things.
things. And you were acting chair or chair?
Yeah,
not quite
so I
certain
did
which.
a stint as chair from '94 to '95. I can still remember Jim when I did leave. I can't remember who took me to the airport, but when I left, Jim, I can still remember him down when that lower parking lot was there next to the Union. He said, well, someday you may even want to be chair here. I said, Jim, that'll never happen. I said, I don't have any desire to be an administrator. And I think it was the '94-'95 year Jim wanted to come out, and I did a year stint as chair then, and then I think we hired Larry Leak after that. Yeah, and Larry did 3 years, and then Jim came back. And then Jim wanted to retire, come out again in 2004, so I agreed to do it for a year, and then 4 years later I came out. So 2004 to 2008, we got through the 2007 NCATE review, and then came out. So I did the 5 years out of those 24 as chair.
For somebody who didn't want administration.
Right, yeah. And again, don't want to, will not go back into administration. I've had that experience, and it was good. You know, I think I did a nice job at it. There were certain aspects that were rewarding with that job, but I enjoy teaching, and that's what I've spent most of my time doing. I haven't taught probably as many courses. I know a lot of people, they have a whole list of courses. I've primarily done the social studies methods, the foundations courses, and then social studies related courses. And that's what I enjoy. I enjoy working with the undergrads.
And did you observe student teachers?
Yeah, and then I've supervised lots of student teachers as well, which gets me out in the schools. I'm not supervising them currently, but I do have a class that goes out into the schools. We're out in Pikesville Middle School, and it's nice to go out because I've got several former students that are there.
Yes.
And it's nice to see those folks. I've taken another class a few years prior to Dumbarton Middle School, which is where Scott and Katie went through school, but there are lots of former students that are there. You know, I see a lot of folks when I'm out at different functions, and it's rewarding to see those folks. Now, also moving into to administrative roles. I know that we've got several that are high school and middle school principals, in the metropolitan area. So that's enjoyable.
It is.
Also worked on different programs, primarily looking at, I think their official title is pre-secondary. It's programs to recruit kids into either into college or into the teaching profession. So really, for 7 years. A good part of the 90s, I worked on a grant, Reader's Digest DeWitt Wallace grant that Morgan State had called Project Prime, which was the program to recruit and inspire minorities into education. And I was Towson's rep. There was a representative from Hopkins and from Morgan and from Coppin, from Loyola, from Notre Dame, from BCCC. And the idea was to kind of grow your own teachers. So we had lots of different programs. We developed the FEA programs. There was a high school course that we got put into the city school curriculum. And then I worked with the middle school program, where we had about a dozen middle schools that worked with a course that kind of focused on the teaching profession and getting kids interested in going to college and teaching. So that was really rewarding. Jim Binko kind of got me into that, tapped me for that, and I got to know other folks in institutions of higher education. I got to know the Baltimore City schools that way, and really appreciated that. That led to some work with MHEC. I did some things with pre-collegiate intervention programs with MHEC, with working with Kay Broadwater in the art department. Beth Wilkins, who was here, we got a grant through the American Association of University Women, where we worked for a couple of years with Western High School in Baltimore City, and it was a program to recruit females into math and science teaching, and it had 40 girls a year from Western that would come for Saturday academies that we ran in conjunction with the folks in math and science. That was enjoyable to do. That was really enjoyable to see those girls come to Towson. Then there were a significant number of them that came to Towson, and graduated from here and went on to teaching. Did another Gear Up program, which was a federal grant, primarily with Barbara Bass in the Maryland Writing Project, and had a lot of those kids come through. Worked with Digital Harbor High School and Walbrook, what was then Walbrook High School. I don't know, they've got so many names for these different smaller schools now. Worked at Edmondson High School as well, so that was enjoyable. To have those kids. We worked a lot of Saturdays, with workshops for those kids, and then going out and doing workshops for their parents and stuff. So that was interesting to do. So those are, some of the things that I did while I've been here.
That's a lot of things.
Yeah.
How has teacher education changed, do you think, from the time when you did student teaching to what you're engaging students in now? Or has it not changed? I mean, I'm not suggesting that it even needed to be changed, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I think Miami prepared me so well because actually I had 2 methods courses in social studies and really a lot of that is on the doorstep of Mike Fuller, just because he was such a dedicated, person, and I had such great experiences with my student teaching. I think a lot of it is what you put into it. So I'm not sure what. I would assume that teacher ed was a lot like what was going on at Miami. I think that that things went well. I think when I came here in '89, with what was going on with the folks that we had, I think that Towson did a great job in terms of producing teachers. I think the one thing that has made a big difference, and I think was an improvement, was going for us in the late '90s, early 2000s to the Professional Development School Network. It's not a perfect system, but I think it's better than what we were doing back then, because then it was like, I can remember with the principles class, Principles of Secondary Education, which is where students get an initial field experience. I can still remember they got these little cards that the teachers had to sign off on when they got their 20 credits, and we just kind of sent them anywhere. And we really had very little control over that.
Right.
And didn't know what that experience was like. Now, we go out with, or at least we go out with them, and we know what they're seeing, and then we can bring that back into the classroom. That's good. I think with for secondary, we've got that internship 2 days a week just prior to student teaching, where they go and they spend a lot of time, in the school, so they get to know the kids and the classrooms and the curriculum and the mentors that they're working with. And that's beneficial, because then they go in and student teach, and they're more set up to be successful, I think, student teaching. Whereas I can remember, again, going to Baltimore County offices with the social studies coordinators and say, it was, well, this teacher will be a good match for this student. We would let them know, but they were still kind of going everywhere, in the county, rather than focused on the schools that we've developed a relationship with, where the mentors know us and we know them, and you've got a liaison that the school provides, and we've got a Towson person there in addition to the university supervisor. So I think that's a much better system for our folks. I guess I could say that the focus on assessment is a change. I'm still not convinced that it's the savior that a lot of folks, feel that it's going to be. But I think that that's another thing that that students have to focus, that our students have to focus on, and that's.
And this is assessment of the kids in schools.
Well, it's of the kids in schools, but then it's of our students too, and that we've got to document all of these experiences that our students have. That sometimes, I think, overall, whether it be in the K-12 setting or whether it be in the higher ed setting, that just becomes so cumbersome.
Yes.
And I really think that this emphasis on the assessments in terms of evaluation of teachers is going to be an issue that I think is going to be extremely challenging for people going into teacher education and into the teaching profession. I just see this trying to link student test scores or changes in student performance to a teacher's salary is just going to be extremely problematic, and I think is going to take away a lot of the joy that people feel in teaching. And maybe it's necessary in terms of accountability, but I just am not yet convinced that they've got a system in place that's valid or reliable. And I think that that's going to be problematic for young folks going into the profession.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there anything we've missed about your experience here or your career generally that you can think of that you'd like to share?
Oh, I'm sure there are things. I don't know. It's been pretty amazing the way the campus has changed. I mean, if you kind of look at a
Lord,
retrospective,
yes.
I came with, there were 12,000 students. We were then Towson State University. I think we were, yeah. We made the switch to Towson University. I guess that's okay. But, just looking out Hawkins Hall and instead of seeing Lightly Tall there, seeing the College of Liberal Arts is pretty amazing. Just seeing all the landscaping, is very different. Seeing all of the development over on the West Campus, with the different residence halls and the new, whatever, the Commons, I guess, is West Village, over there is kind of amazing. I haven't seen it lately, but the development of the new Towson Center, is pretty wild. But going from the 12,000 to I don't know, I guess our numbers are 22. Is kind of amazing as well.
It is. Do you think, and what kind of effect do you think that that's had on faculty here and your and teacher education?
Yeah, I don't think that larger is necessarily better, and I don't buy that argument that we've got to get bigger.
Right.
Not that we needed to stay at 12,000, but I don't think that growth just for its own sake really did that much for us. I've got to say that within, I know primarily, secondary is what I know, is that we've still been able to maintain small class sizes and close contact with students.
It sounds like even closer contact with this PDS model.
Yeah,
in place.
yeah, and that's been helpful. So our cohorts have been small. That hasn't been amazing, in terms of its growth. So I think that, in that sense, we've been fine. I don't know. I just think that you lose when you get so large. There are just things that that you lose, and it's not quite as intimate as what you'd like. Again, I've been around this 24 years. A lot of the people that, all the people, I guess, that were here when I came, as you well know, have moved on. I mean, there are a lot of good people that have followed them, but that's been kind of a change. So I don't know if perhaps not knowing as many people across campus is because we've grown so much might be a reality now that wasn't when I first came. But again, and then I was on more university-wide committees. I was on the Senate. I was on the Research and Development Committee, for faculty awarding those grants. So I guess I saw more people than I do now.
Right.
But I'm not sure if our junior faculty, get as much exposure to folks in the other colleges.
Right.
So I think that's been a change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the college.
I used to know everybody that came to those College of Education meetings, and that's not the case anymore. Again, I guess I got to go more out of my way to introduce myself to folks. But
well, part of it is the rapid growth in the College of Education, and the transition from faculty retiring and bringing in a whole lot of new faculty.
Yep. So I think that's it.
Okay. One last question.
Okay.
And having been in the field for more than a quarter of a century, what wisdom would you share with individuals who are considering teaching as a profession, as a life choice?
Well, and it's, this is true. We moved Foundations, what I came, it was kind of a capstone course. Now it's kind of an introduction to education course, and actually going away because of the new core. But, I tell students, I said, one of the things you've got to do is investigate what it's like in school. So I try to give them, and I, have contacts with schools for after-school clubs and those kinds of things. I tell them, you've got to volunteer, or you've got to substitute teach. If you've got Fridays off, go and, volunteer at a local school and try to substitute, or go and, work in it with an ESOL group of students. I have, there are different clubs at Dumbarton after school where I try to get, I ask students if they want to work with kids, then, then go, because you got to see. It's not just when you were in middle school or high school. You've got to see them in a different context. So I want to make sure that they, have thought about working with kids at that age. So I try to get them to volunteer as much, as what they can. But they've really got to think about that. And then I think they need to see, those policy changes that are going on. They need to talk to teachers. They need to talk to the students that are, that are going through. So they really have to investigate if it's something that they want to do, because if they're going to be good at it, teaching, is a full-time career. It's not, and I mean, this is kind of a misperception I think that some people have. I mean, not most of our students that go into it, but we do have a number of students that, well, I'll just go into it and see what it's like. I mean, if you're going to put all the time and effort into it, we know we have a high retention rate. You need to do more investigation before you go. But I think with the other students, it's just persevere. I saw one of the first-year teachers the other day, and she was saying, "Oh my God," she said, "this is just so hard." She said, and I always say, well, when they come into principals, it's like, "Oh, this is such a hard semester," and then they go into the internship, and "Oh, this is even worse. It'll be better when I student teach," and then they go into student teaching, and I always love when they come back that first night for the reading class. It's like, "Oh, I'm so tired because of the," but then that first year of teaching is, is exceptionally difficult. I said,
Yes.
you
New
just got to
lesson
keep
plans.
going, and you got to persevere, and by the time you get to that third year, you're going to feel comfortable, with where you are. You still won't know anything, but you're, you're a little bit closer, and then think about, improving your craft and coming back to school and doing the professional development things. So I really think before getting into it, it's something that they really have to investigate and know about, rather than, oh, gee, yeah, it's just something that I'll do.
Doesn't pay particularly well.
No?
You really don't get
No.
summers off.
Right?
Mhm.
And we go through all that in the foundations class at the beginning when they,
Yeah, but can be rewarding.
Right, right. And it is. It's it's been a good career for me, and I again see students that have been out there for the 15 or 20 years, and that's kind of hard to believe, but but they've enjoyed it, and they've liked kind of progressing as a career. It is kind of frustrating those that who after a year or two that they go into something else. I don't like this. You could have known that before. So, and I feel bad for kids that that take out the loans now.
Yes.
Take on that burden of debt and then decide after a year or two that, well, gee, now I'm not going to do this, and then they've got to switch. That's tough. That's tough. I think that's another major difference. I mean, I was able to pay my way through school and took out some loans, but I feel bad for students that that have to go through that now with that burden of debt that they've got to take on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last comment? Anything else?
Nope, it's been enjoyable.
Great.
I hope this is helpful.
Wonderfully helpful.
Okay. Well, good.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.